Now, have you ever heard that we were born into sin? I have. And from a young age, we were raised that you don't get big sin and you don't get small sin, and that all sin are equal. Which prompted me to go have a look at what the Bible says about sin. Now, if you go read from James, from about verse 13, he talks about sin and the progressive nature of sin. So he says, when you are tempted, let nobody say that God tempted me, for God does not tempt. Now, that word tempt and the word test has two different outcomes in mind. The one where you get tested has an outcome that you should pass the test. That's why God tests us. For our own sake we get tested, because he already knows what the outcome's going to be. But he wants us to understand what our character is, and that we need to build our character, and that's why we get tested. But temptation has in mind that you fail. Now the Bible says we get tempted when we have our own desires drag us away, and then when those desires come to full fruition, it turns into sin. And when sin grows up, it brings forth death. It's basically like somebody walking to a piece of wood, then throwing petrol on it, and then lighting it up, and then when it comes to its full fruition and it burns out, it dies. Have you ever seen somebody so entangled in sin that you think to yourself, well, they're going to have a premature death if they continue on this road? Well, there was a person like that, and his name was David. There was a progressive nature of sin in his life where he first committed adultery with a woman, and then he made her pregnant and found out she was pregnant. He then killed the husband. See, desire to have adulterous affair dragged him, turned into a sinful deed, and then when sin grew up, death occurred. And then when that happened, David wrote Psalm 51. He's talking about the progressive nature of sin. Sin in Greek means to miss my mark. So he said, dear Lord, clean me, I'm dirty. Put me in your washing machine and clean me from my sin. I have missed the mark. And then he says, there was a line and I have transgressed. When you step over the line, and then wash me thoroughly from my iniquities. I've sinned, I've missed the mark, I've transgressed, and now I'm continuing doing sin. And those are iniquities. And David knew that, and he knew the progressive nature of sin takes you and leads to a place where it's not great for you. Are you entangled in sin? Are you entangled in iniquities? Are you keeping on transgressing? Or are you definitely just missing your mark where you aren't doing what God has created you for? My invite to you is to live a purposeful life and to not transgress, and definitely not to progress to iniquities where you carry on with sin. Join me in living a purposeful life where we try and hit our mark.